Yeah, thank you, Walter. Good to be on.
It's good to have you here. It's been quite some time since you and I have chatted, which feels like an oversight on my part.
Yeah, well, maybe mine. So I agree.
And look, tonight I want to give you as much time as you want to talk about your campaign and talk about the vision that you have for Minnesota and why it is that you're running and lessons learned from your previous run and what have you. But I think I want to start off tonight with getting the big elephant in the room out of the way, getting the tough question out of the way, and just to clear the air a little bit, because as you're of course aware, there is this reporting in the Star Tribune that's relevant to the content of our programming last night. Last night we had on Abdi Muhammad, who is a Muslim Trump supporter, caucused with the Republicans in 2016. We also had James Carson, who, as I'm sure you recall, is the former chair of CD4 Republicans. And we were talking about this controversy involving Cindy Pugh and another legislator. Cindy Pugh, of course, somebody who I know personally, who I know you were familiar with, who, great gal, but who shared this post on Facebook along with Dave Sina, the current CD chair over there on the east side of the metro area. That was basically this warning that Muslims are organizing, Muslims are, quote, infiltrating, unquote, the Republican caucuses next Tuesday. And that, of course, caused a predictable kerfluffle in the media. And you apparently have gotten roped into this now, too. According to the Star Tribune, you were on a podcast with our friends, Jack and Jake, their Living Free podcast, and you're quoted as having said in response to the Pew controversy that, and this is quoting you now from the Star Tribune, I think Pew raises very legitimate issues. I think there's a huge cultural issue we're talking about here. Not just showing up at caucus, but there are some here who are trying to change what America is, and we can't allow that. There are people in this state and country who seek to replace the Constitution with Sharia. It's not most Muslims, but to deny that this threat exists is pretty naive. This is a question that I want to start off with, and just to kind of give you an opportunity here to clear the air and drill down on exactly what it is that we're aiming at here. What is the nature of this threat? To what extent is Islamic infiltration of the Republican Party or other institutions something that we need to be concerning ourselves with?
Well, I'm not terribly concerned about infiltration of the party, and certainly not of caucuses. And, I had a long conversation before the story that you were reading from in the Star Tribune with Patrick Kulikan, and he asked me the same question probably 4 different times in different ways in hopes that I would contradict myself.
Right.
And, of course, he only puts some of what I say in there, but I think I was pretty clear. This is America, and anybody who wants to go to caucus should be invited to caucus. I could care less what their religion is, as long as you have at least a general belief in the basic tenets of the Republican Party and you're not there just to make trouble. I don't care about your religion at all. The bigger question, though, that came up regarding whether there is some sort of threat, whether there are people in our state, in our country, who would seek to change the country and replace the Constitution with Sharia, that does exist. And as I, was quoted in the paper, I don't think that's an existential threat. I don't lay awake at night thinking about it. Mm-hmm. But I do believe that to just deny that exists is really naive. I mean, we've seen in our own state recruitment efforts for terrorism. And I think for a while, a lot of people denied that until they couldn't deny it anymore. So, my belief is we have to be honest about it. I don't consider myself a cultural or a religious warrior. In fact, I just had this conversation. I'm just leaving a debate or a forum that we had, a Tea Party forum that we had, and I was talking to someone who has a different candidate than me in the race. And I told them really frankly, I said, if you're looking for a candidate who is going to campaign or govern by preaching the evils of Islam, it's not me. You're going to have to go find someone else. If you want a candidate who's going to be really straightforward and honest on illegal immigration and refugee resettlement, that's a different story because I think those are important issues. But if we turn it into just a cultural war, it's not going to do us any good.
Now, you've been in ever-present presence in the Republican Party as long as I've been involved. I mean, coming into the party in 2009, 2010 as an activist, you've always been there to one degree or another, always been somebody who's been actively involved either in chairing conventions or in your role as a Hennepin County Commissioner or what have you. And so you've seen, as I've seen, these efforts that have come and gone, most notably by former state representative Dan Severson, to try to engage in what's traditionally called minority outreach, right? This idea that we're going to go out there and we're going to build these relationships and we're going to foster new constituencies, with the intention of eventually earning people's votes, but to start with just kind of understanding who people are, getting them to understand who we are through relationship and building upon common values. Do you get the sense that that's an effort that has gained any sort of traction over the past couple of years, or has it lost it, and why, one way or the other?
I don't know if it's gained traction over the last couple of years. I think it has gained traction over the last several years,
sure.
Certainly. And I can tell you in 2014, when I was our candidate for governor, other than Dan Severson, who was running for Secretary of State at the time, there was no candidate in the state on the Republican side, or probably the Democrat side, because they just ignore these populations entirely and take them for granted,
yep.
who put more effort into the Somali community in trying to outreach and get them involved in the campaign. And it wasn't a tactical decision where we said, okay, this is a community we're going to go after. It was simply because there were several Somali Republicans who got involved in my campaign and wanted to work and said, let us help you. And we said, let's go for it. So I ended up going to a lot of things, and we did a little bit better in those precincts that were heavy Somali than Emmer did 4 years before me. Not a lot. So I think we are making slow but steady progress. And to me, it's about showing up. I think showing up is just as important as the message you're sharing, because you can have the greatest message in the world, but if you're never there for them to see you and trust you and not believe the horrible things that they're being told about you as a Republican, a school choice isn't going to get you any more votes if they think that you're a racist.
So you've already started to answer my next question, which is, of course, you were the party's endorsed candidate in 2014, and this is your second attempt at running for governor. That's a decision that I have to presume comes with a fair amount of thought and consideration regarding lessons learned and, whether or not it's worth taking another crack at it. Obviously, you've decided that it is. What's different about this run which gives you confidence in your ability to succeed?
Where to start? I could tell you at least 20 things that I am doing differently. Some small things, some really big things. Let me give you the biggest mistake I think we made in the last election, and it had to do with Republican turnout. So I spent the first 15 months of the last campaign seeking almost solely Republican votes. First for the endorsement, and then a very difficult primary. And we won the primary, and we had 3 months left, and we made a tactical decision that I have to go after independents, focus like a laser beam on that, because I haven't been talking to independents during this campaign, and you can't win Minnesota as a Republican unless you win independents. And so we did that, and it worked amazingly well. I beat Dayton with independents by 10%, and I tied with independent women, which is unheard of for a conservative Republican male in this state. But Republican turnout was dismal in 2014 in Minnesota. And there are a lot of reasons for that, but I will take responsibility for it because I didn't, as a candidate, I was so focused on independence, I didn't make sure that all the Republicans and potential Republicans in this state who didn't know me were excited enough to get out off the couch and vote for me. I think there were a lot of people who said, Hennepin County Commissioner, he's not going to change anything. He's just, part of the establishment. And that was a painful lesson learned. That will be one of the biggest changes, is not to rely on others to get out the Republican vote. I got to do it myself. So that's probably the biggest one. And that has to do with where you spend your time, where you spend your money digitally, maybe how you share your message in certain places. But that's a big one, and I think that will make the difference between winning and losing, that and not running against an incumbent with 100% name recognition. That'll help too.
Right. Yeah, I have to say, as an observer of both that election and the previous one with Tom Emmer as the endorsed candidate, in both of those cycles, my perception was that you guys were not able to let people know who you were. The Jeff Johnson that I know was not on display in my perception to the general populace. And that's really unfortunate because I think people would like the Jeff Johnson that I know if they got a chance to meet him. So hopefully that'll happen this time around.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And I think, you travel around the state and try to get in front of as many people as you can. But obviously, TV is a huge, huge part of that. And I actually raised more money than Mark Dayton in 2014. So we weren't at a disadvantage from that standpoint on introducing myself to Minnesotans, but the outside money, we got outspent about 4-1.
Yeah.
And it was all negative outside money on their side. And, it's really tough to overcome. I don't think that will happen this time with an open seat, with these national groups seeing that Trump almost won Minnesota. The fact that we've got both the House and Senate, I think that there's a much greater interest from the Republican Governors Association, for example, in playing in Minnesota. As long as the polls show there's a chance to win, we won't be outspent like that with outside money, which would make a huge difference.
You had mentioned the perception amongst Republican voters that potentially because you're a Hennepin County commissioner, that there's this kind of false impression that you're a metro guy and that there might be a tinge of moderation to your views. Of course, I know that not to be the case, having known you for quite some time. But there is this sense that we need outsiders right now. It's something that's actually, born of the very Tea Party movement that's responsible for bringing me into the Republican Party. How do you answer that notion that it's time for a fresh face? It's time for somebody who has no idea how any of this stuff works, but is committed to these values and is going to go in there and fight for the people?
Yeah, and my response is, you want someone who's committed to those values, and I am. But if you really want to fundamentally change state government, which I happen to believe we must do, it's not a matter of getting up there and tinkering around the edges. We have to make fundamental cultural changes in government. It helps a lot to know government. And, I was only in state government for 6 years. I served 3 terms in the House. That was a self-imposed term limit. And I'm in my 3rd and final term on the county board. That's also a self-imposed term limit because I believe in them. And, I think people are very open to that. If you haven't lived your whole life and made your fortune off of politics, which I haven't, I spent most of my adult life in the private sector, but also been involved in politics during that time. And they believe that you actually are going to do what you say because you've done that in the past. I think they're willing to see some level of political experience as a plus, because it's hard to fundamentally change government if you need a year or 2 to kind of figure it out, especially if we have all Republican control, which we likely will if we elect a Republican governor. I'm optimistic, and I hope we'd have it for 4 or 8 years, but I'm going to assume we'll have it for 2, and you better get a lot done on day one moving forward, because there's a lot to do, and there's no guarantee you're going to have those votes 2 years later.
We're talking to Jeff Johnson, candidate for the Republican endorsement for governor in 2018. JohnsonForGovernor.org is his website that you can go check out. Any chance we can keep you for another segment? We got a couple people on the line that'd like to ask you questions.
Absolutely.
Very much appreciate that. We will be back with Jeff Johnson shortly. This is Closing Argument. My name is Walter Hudson, Twin Cities News Talk, AM 1130, 103.5 FM, TwinCitiesNewsTalk.com.
Fox News updates every half hour and the best talk hosts in the business. This is TwinCitiesNewsTalk.com.
1130 AM.
Because you deserve the truth.
When it comes down to investing your hard-earned money the right way, you need honest answers. There is no need to be intimidated or embarrassed. Learn the skills to understand how the markets work to get the best results. Hi, this is Marty Young from Online Trading Academy. Join us for a free investing class by dialing pound 250 on your cell phone and use keyword OTA. Again, pound 250 on your cell phone, use keyword OTA, or go to learnwithota.com.
Does getting a flavorful, balanced, and convenient dinner on the table night after night feel like a chore?
Let HelloFresh take care of the weekly meal planning so you can save time and actually have fun cooking and eating amazing meals. Visit HelloFresh.com and choose what meals you want from an ever-changing, customizable, and always delicious menu. Then let HelloFresh shop and deliver pre-measured ingredients with simple recipes that come together in around 30 minutes, have just 6 steps, and require minimal cleanup. But the best part? It costs less than $10 a meal. So if there's ever been a time to kick those 5 p.m. excuses, break out of your recipe rut, and take the first step towards unstoppable, it's now. Just go to HelloFresh.com/family to get $30 off your first box. That's HelloFresh.com/family for $30 off. HelloFresh.com/family.
You're listening to Closing Argument with Walter Hudson.
Tomorrow morning, it's the Friday Roundtable with Nick Zerwas and comedian Brian Miller, plus your world-famous parody song contest.
Justice and Drew, Twin Cities News Talk, AM 1130 and 103.5 FM.
We are chatting with Jeff Johnson, who is a candidate for the Republican endorsement for governor right here in the state of Minnesota, running in 2018. Closing argument. My name is Walter Hudson, Twin Cities News Talk, AM 1130, 103.5 FM. 651-989-5855 is the number to join us this evening. And we're welcoming Jeff back onto the air. Appreciate having you with us, Jeff. Now, I'm going to try my hand. It's been a while since I've tried to have 2 lines on the air at the same time, so we'll see how this works. Abdi, welcome to the program. Or is this Jacqueline? We got Jacqueline. All right, Jacqueline. You got a question for Jeff Johnson?
Jacqueline America.
Oh, how you doing, Jacqueline?
Republicans, good. Republicans, independents, libertarians. We need to elect Jeff Johnson to be our governor because he's going to get rid of the Met Council. He's going to stop their overreach, and hopefully our city and municipalities can work independently of their progressive crap from this Met Council. We need to get Jeff in. Also, another thing with the Somalis, come on, Republicans, get real. Somalis are family and pro-life people, and they're small business people. They're Republicans. Another thing, too, we have to stop this goofy legislation, too. We can't go and talk about marriage amendments during a freaking governor. Sorry. They shouldn't do that during a governor election. We can't hate gay people. Not that we do. I'm not saying we do. But that hurt. That's why Republicans didn't show up. They didn't want to be a part of that.
I appreciate your thoughts, Jacqueline. Jeff, do we have you on the line?
Yep, I'm here.
Good. Any response there to Jacqueline's comments?
Well, it was the best call you've ever had. And Jacqueline, thanks for bringing up the Met Council. I get asked all the time, what's the first thing you're going to do as governor? And I say I'm going to find a quiet place to go pray for some guidance with my wife, and then I'm going to go fire the Met Council and dismantle that beast once and for all. And not because the Met Council is the biggest problem in Minnesota, but because it is probably the best symbol of what I consider the biggest problem in Minnesota, this belief that there are really 2 classes of people, the ruling class who gets to tell everyone else how they should live their lives, and then everyone else. And I don't believe we can fix the Met Council. I think we need to get rid of it and start over with a very small elected body that has very limited powers to take care of wastewater management.
You may have found an issue there that literally no Republican caucusing next Tuesday would disagree with you with.
I hope you're right. Let's
talk to Abdi in St. Paul. Of course, this is Abdi Muhammad, who we had in studio last night. Welcome to the program, Abdi.
Thank you, Walter, and glad to speak with Mr. Johnson tonight. I heard your interview with Justice and Drew earlier today, and I'm ready to vote for you. And I think Jacqueline spelled it out perfectly. Your policies on lowering the taxes and cutting spending and having a leaner, more efficient government is something that I welcome wholeheartedly. And I think your comments were very comforting in terms of being open to everybody, caucusing and being involved in the whole, the democratic process. So I appreciate all of that. And I think there is room to speak about, the violence that we've seen in this country and abroad, and having that conversation with Muslim leaders. So I would love to, if possible, arrange that between members of the community and yourself, and I just want to hear your opinions on the fact that we have people like Michelle Bachmann who's made some comments, and of course the situation that we're speaking about now. I think you said it perfectly. You're not you're not running on that. You're running on smaller government, more efficient government, and
Right.
pro-business is what I assume, correct?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Thank you, Abdi. I appreciate that. And we, as I mentioned, we had a forum tonight, and obviously this whole issue came up because it often does during these forums. And a comment that I made was, I actually think we're going to talk about refugee resettlement and sanctuary cities because those are two really important issues. I actually think we can win with the Minnesota public on those issues if we present them in a way that doesn't come across as angry or intolerant. It's not all about, in fact, it's not about religion at all. It's about the rule of law and making sure that people in their communities get to know what's going on and make decisions. So I appreciate your comments and would love to work with you to meet with some people who might be able to give me some more information.
Appreciate your call, Abdi.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can guarantee you Abdi will follow up on that. So look forward to hearing from him. All right, let's go to Steve in St. Paul. Welcome to the program.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen. I was just wondering, Jeff, what's your opinion on the whole MNLARS situation is with the Department of Public Safety and what you do to correct it? Would you give the DPS more money, or would you scrap it altogether?
Well, I'm not going to give them more money at this point because clearly whoever is running that project is incompetent. And what the answer is, because I'm not in the middle of it, I'm not sure. Some people argue, well, if we just farm it out to someone in the private sector, that will solve the problem. That might be the case, but I don't know the background of who is capable of doing that. My understanding was we started with someone from the private sector, and that didn't work, and then it was brought in-house, maybe because of unions and Democrats, I don't know. But I can tell you, number one, when someone has completely and utterly failed at something after spending what they spent, you don't give them more money because they promise you that they'll fix it this time. I would argue probably fire someone and start over in a different way. And MNLARS is a great example of government not doing certain things very well. If the private sector can provide something, I believe in the old Yellow Pages rule. If it's offered in the Yellow Pages by the private sector, they're probably better to do it than government. And MNLARS is a great example of that. MNsure is another great example of that. There's a computer program called the METS system that was remade 3 or 4 years ago. It's a state program that all of the counties use. I'm a Hennepin County commissioner, and we use it to determine eligibility for welfare recipients. This program is so bad that many of the people in Hennepin County who are now using it have quit using it, and they're doing all the work on paper like we did back in the 1960s. And it's costing literally tens of millions of dollars. So, no, they would not get more money. We would figure out a different source, whether it's in another state or in Minnesota, and probably just start over again.
Appreciate that call from Steve. We're listening to Jeff Johnson. He's our guest on the phone this evening. He is a candidate seeking the Republican endorsement for governor in 2018. I got one more question for you, Jeff. Unfortunately, we're going to have to keep it brief because we got a break coming up here. But I'm really interested in hearing you elaborate on a commentary that you recently authored in the Star Tribune that explains why you will be voting against the renaming of Lake Calhoun. And in that commentary, you argued that striking down monuments to our history accomplishes nothing. I'd like to hear you elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure, and unfortunately, it's too late now. I voted against it, but I lost 4-3, and then that moved down to the DNR, and they have now changed the lake name, I think, as of this week. But the point of the op-ed, which I wrote before I voted against it, was that there seems to be this trend to just erase history, thinking that is somehow going to change history. John C. Calhoun had some deplorable views on slavery and race relations. I completely get that. But changing the name of a lake that nobody ever related to John C. Calhoun is not, Bade Makaska is not going to solve anything. And what it does is it just creates all this division and all this fighting and all these bad feelings and doesn't actually move us forward. Let's educate people about John C. Calhoun and what was wrong with his views and make sure our kids understand that. But changing the lake name and patting ourselves on the back, it just doesn't do anything.
Couldn't agree with you more. Appreciate you joining us tonight. Jeff Johnson seeking the Republican endorsement for governor. Caucus is on February 6th. You can find out more information on that, I'm sure, at johnsonforgovernor.org. I assume you guys have caucus information there, correct?
We certainly do, and I'd love to see as many people show up as possible, regardless of who you're supporting.
All right, sounds good. Hey, it's always great having you on, and I appreciate you coming on the program.
Thanks, Walter.
Have a good night, Jeff.